Chapter 1: The Town, the Family, and the Illusion. In the summer of 1883, Oregon was still carving out its identity. The landscapes were both beautiful and treacherous, with towering pines scraping the sky and rivers flowing like veins through the raw earth. In the small town of Pine Hollow, life unfolded at a pace that felt almost timeless. Families gathered around wood-burning stoves, the smell of fresh bread mingling with the scent of cedar. Children raced through dusty streets, laughter swirling in the air. Life presented an idyllic picture. Yet hidden within these charming facades lay tales of a more sinister nature, tales that would unfold through the whispers of the winds that blew through Pine Hollow. At the edge of town stood the Delaney house, a structure both imposing and elegant. Built with rich, dark woods and adorned with intricate woodwork, it seemed to call to those daring enough to approach. Charlotte Delaney, a widow, had established a household that oscillated between warmth and discomfort. Her children, Helen and Samuel, flitted through town like ghosts, their faces pale and an unusual quietude draping over them. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about their peculiarities, but had long relegated the whispers to the realm of gossip. The Delaney household was full of strange delights. Toys spilled over the floors, handcrafted dolls with glass eyes that seemed to glimmer with dark secrets, wooden horses painted with fading colors, and plush animals with worn fur. Each item told a story, shaping a visual narrative that felt both enticing and foreboding. Yet the toys had an unsettling quality, an air of forgotten joy, as though they carried the sorrow of times past. As daylight dimmed, townspeople noticed unusual sights from the Delaney windows. Helen would often stand staring with a blank expression, her little hands pressed against the glass, transfixed by shadows only she could see. The family seemed to retreat into their own world, isolated, too strange for the rest of Pine Hollow. Charlotte, though polite when encountered, maintained an overprotective demeanor, always sending the children indoors before dusk. On one such evening, an errant passerby reported seeing Samuel whispering to the dolls, their expressions turning unnervingly lifelike beneath the dimming light. Rumors began to swirl, painting the Delaney family as recluses within their carefully curated world. But it was Helen, with her haunting stare, who held the community's fascination and dread in equal measure. The inevitable question lingered among the townsfolk: what lay beneath the veneer of normalcy? Was there a mystery hidden in the basement, a place that seemed a sanctuary turned prison? And with Charlotte's quiet insistence on keeping her children indoors, the shadow over the Delaney house grew thicker, darker. Chapter 2: Whispers, Warnings, and Silence. As autumn settled in, Pine Hollow succumbed to its own sense of isolation. The leaves turned to fiery shades of orange and red, swirling in the crisp air, while the Delaney family withdrew further into their home, creating a palpable tension that spread through town like fog on a cool morning. In the local church, whispered prayers mingled with fleeting glances toward the house that loomed at the edge of their lives. In town meetings, murmurs about the strange sounds emanating from the Delaney basement began to circulate. A neighbor remarked that at night, peculiar thumps echoed through the walls, accompanied by an eerie melody, children's laughter blending with a more sinister sound that brought chills even to the bravest souls. Charitable intentions morphed into silent accusations, and unease connected the residents, threading through their collective conscience like a dark seam. One fateful evening, Dr. Emmett Lawson, the town physician, reluctantly paid a visit after Charlotte's request for child-rearing counsel. As he entered the grand yet fractured Delaney home, he felt an uncanny weight settle in the air. Covered in shadows, the rooms felt like portals to an unwanted past, each step taken with trepidation. Helen lingered in the corner, her head tilting ever so slightly as he approached. Charlotte, with her disconcerting smile, welcomed him, an enticing facade overlaid with an unshakable vigilance. "You know they're good children," she began, her voice hollow. "It's just, they need time." The tone felt rehearsed, as if the words were drawn from a script written long ago. During the consultation, the doctor learned of the children's reluctance to play outside, their retreat into the basement being a routinely danced ritual. In the depths of his mind, concern gnawed at him. He had long suspected the toys that cluttered their lives were more than mere distractions. Despite his expertise, he found himself dismissive of the peculiar sounds he had heard months prior in favor of a pressing sense of practicality. After all, the home was well kept, the food abundant. Bizarrely, he left the Delaney house convinced there was nothing awry, though a seed of doubt began to root itself deep. However, Dr. Lawson's instincts sparked curiosity. The more he observed, the more elusive it became to shake the ideas that clung to him. Inside his mind, the children formed shadows, questions about their physical and emotional states entwining tightly, binding him to a quest driven by his professional concern and personal unease. Weeks slipped by as more unsettling accounts emerged. Parents began to report their children speaking in hushed tones about Helen's whispered secrets. "We should visit the dolls," one youth suggested in school, sending chills down spines as the notion of the basement loomed closer and closer. The town remained afloat on whispers, but where they would lead remained a question waiting in the shadows. Chapter 3: The Investigation and the Unveiling of Horror. By the time early winter crested upon Pine Hollow, the air felt thick with tension, as if the town itself held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. The Delaney house, once a beautiful structure, now felt oppressive and unwelcoming. Investigative whispers had reached a crescendo. The townsfolk had become emboldened by fear, pushing for answers they sensed but couldn't articulate. At last, a group of townspeople, uniting in their resolve, took matters into their own hands. Armed with willow switches and suspicion, they marched toward the house one gray afternoon, finding Charlotte seated at a parlor table adorned with intricate lace, her expression one of thinly veiled defiance. The children, feeling the disturbance in the air, disappeared into the dim recesses of the home. Confrontation became inevitable. "Where are the children?" a bold voice rang out. She blinked slowly, an imperceptible glimmer of fear glazing her features but quickly replaced by her customary calm. "They're safe," she asserted, brushing them off as if they were but an intrusive wind. The tension fractured into silent agreement. The basement was the heart of the mystery, a visceral place that echoed with stories untold. The townsfolk pressed on, determined to uncover the truth that the Delaneys had so artfully concealed. As the door to the basement creaked open, the overwhelming scent of musty wood and stagnant air flooded their senses. Descending into the depths, they half expected to find dusty old crates, perhaps a skeleton caked in dust or remnants of laughter forgotten long ago. Instead, they discovered a nightmare wrapped in innocence. Toys littered the floor, but these were not ordinary playthings. The glass eyes of dolls glinted with a vibrant sheen, seeming to watch, waiting, almost accusatory. Other objects appeared more grotesque. Twisted figures that looked as if they were forged from shadows, each one imbued with a malevolence reminiscent of long-lost childhood fears. A girl's voice broke the silence. "They tell me things," Helen's whisper echoed in the half-light. Those gathered turned toward her silhouette as she stood in the corner, the glimmer of something wicked playing in her eyes. They felt the air around them thicken, suffocating, and fear turned to horror. As light flickered through the narrow openings, it cast grotesque shadows that danced against the walls, forming shapes of haunted innocence. What had once been toys became grotesque figments of a mind warped by despair. When the townspeople finally grasped the chilling horror of the toys and the secrets they held, the weight of their gathered whispers sunk deeper, both devastating and overwhelming. Chapter 4: What Remains, Trials, Names, and Memory. The aftermath of that harrowing day spiraled into a wave of tragedy that would forever change Pine Hollow. Charlotte Delaney, stripped of the guise she had worn so carefully, was taken into custody, charged with abuse that transcended comprehension. The children were rescued, but what they bore within the depths of their minds was a storm no one could foresee. As winter melted into spring, healing was slow and often non-existent. Some children spoke of shadows dancing in the dim light of basement corners, while others remained painfully silent, locked in a trance of the past that echoed like ethereal songs of muted toys. Helen and Samuel were eventually placed with families sympathetic to their plight, but what could be offered was never enough to mend what had long been broken. Dr. Lawson, grappling with his misplaced beliefs, devoted his efforts to helping the children heal, becoming a guardian of sorts against a town's collective guilt. Conversations buzzed about the nature of evil, how it manifested in silent whispers in quiet rooms, complicating relationships within the otherwise quaint rural town. Residents debated how something so insidious could thrive under the same sun that cast light on their daily lives. They pondered the toys that had aged like flesh, having absorbed the secrets of despair. These objects, once symbols of childhood innocence, had instead become conduits for wretchedness. Eventually, a memorial emerged, not just for the children who were lost for too long but for the essence of innocence itself, forever altered by the shadows cast within the Delaney house. Candles burned softly, flickering in the night, illuminating the faces of those who held on to the understanding that darkness could lay hidden beneath even the brightest exterior. Pine Hollow may have gained a semblance of closure, yet the haunting memories lingered, whispering truths about the nature of evil. As stories intertwined, children still spoke in hushed tones, not of the heroes who rescued them but of the toys that had aged like flesh. Today, even the gentle winds through Pine Hollow carry echoes of their ordeal, proof that darkness dwells not just in shadows but in the forgotten corners of the heart. Chapter 5: The Shattered Silence. Years passed in Pine Hollow, and the echoes of that past tragedy evolved into a set of collective memories, some admitting to have witnessed the horrors within the Delaney house while others preferred to erase it from their minds entirely. Yet remnants of that darkness lingered like phantoms, ever present in the town's consciousness. The Delaney children struggled to redefine their identities, grappling to escape the emptiness left behind. Helen and Samuel grew up in the care of families who sought to shelter them from the past. Dr. Lawson monitored their progress, becoming a silent guardian as they navigated their way through the tumult of recovery. He often invited them to the clinic, an open space where they could voice their fears without judgment. Some days they would sit for hours, surrounded by the comforting scent of antiseptic and the faint hum of bustling life outside, unconsciously tracing the patterns of sunlight dancing across the floor. Helen often found herself lost in reveries about the basement, the toys, and their whispered promises. Samuel, on the other hand, tried to put the memories away, masking his trauma with a bravado that earned him friends but left him battling demons alone. The resilient spirit forged through adversity granted him solace but never erased the sense of loss that hovered around him, like a heavy fog. One day, halfway through a particularly rainy autumn, Helen returned to Pine Hollow's remnants of the Delaney house with Dr. Lawson, her heart racing at the thought of confronting the ghosts that had haunted her. The house, now overgrown with vines and desolate shadows, stood as a testimony to the churning score of their history. Yet within those decaying walls lay remnants of her childhood, and in that moment, Helen understood how vital it was to confront her past, to wrest control back from the shadows that had held them captive. Venturing down the once familiar stairway was like traversing an archway into another realm, an embrace of nostalgia intertwined with the dread of remembering. As the doctor shined his lantern across the room, patches of dust danced in the beam of light, illuminated fragments casting silhouettes across the peeling walls. Where toys once whispered their secrets, there was now an unsettling stillness. Each creak of the aging floorboards reminded Helen of the laughter turned to stone. "I have to see them," she whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Lawson gave her a nod, aware that confronting her past was a vital step toward reclaiming her future. She stepped further inside, calling out, "Are you here?" The silence enveloped her, and for a moment, time stood still. The toys lay untouched, shadowy figures frozen in the halcyon days of her childhood. Yet in that stillness, Helen felt a flicker of warmth, a longing to remember the joy that once was. But as her gaze fell upon a particularly worn doll, the memories grew heavy. It had been the one she cherished the most, the doll that had listened to every secret, her fears and whispered dreams. With trembling fingers, she reached out, brushing the dust away to reveal the familiar face. "I'm here," she breathed, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm still here." Dr. Lawson watched the transformation unfold before him, a fragile bloom struggling to flower amidst hostility. "You're taking back your voice, Helen," he remarked softly. "You're telling your story." Helen took a deep breath, feeling the weight of spirits that had long sheltered her. A sense of closure cascaded over her like a shroud being lifted. She took her brother by the hand, and together they began the journey of rediscovering themselves, recrafting their individual narratives from threads of what had been frayed. Chapter 6, Rebuilding Hope. The community of Pine Hollow had changed as well, navigating its own healing trajectory. Years of denial and silence were slowly peeled back, exposing the raw fractures of a town scarred by hidden truths. The memorial to the Delaney children had become a sacred gathering place, where people began sharing their stories, not just the darkness but the hope that emerged from adversity. Dr. Lawson organized community discussions, where townspeople explored the intersections of joy and trauma, learning how to transform whispered fears into shared narratives. With each session, new faces graced the circle, and the fabric of collective understanding began to weave itself anew. Samuel, though quiet, emerged more comfortable in sharing his experience. He spoke of the quiet magic that had once filled the toys, how they served as anchors, holding fragments of what childhood could be. Community members listened with rapt attention, their hearts heavy with compassion, and for the first time he felt free, holding sway over his experiences. Helen, emboldened by her journey, began to volunteer in local schools, teaching children the vital importance of speaking up, encouraging them to express their thoughts freely in a safe and caring environment. On weekends, she would host activities inspired by the toys of her past, involving crafts and stories that celebrated creativity and community, unifying bonds through what had once divided them. Before long, whispers of hope began to fill Pine Hollow, a renewed spirit circulating among its residents. The shadows of the past began to recede as houses turned to homes and walls transformed into havens of laughter. The magic of childhood gradually returned to a town that had long shunned the brightness of innocence. As the seasons folded into years, Helen and Samuel remained connected, two souls once intertwined by trauma, now united by resilience. Their shared journeys brought them to a deeper understanding that life could emerge from the most anguished experiences. They learned the power of holding each other accountable in their healing, and rather than shy away from the media that had once essentialized them, they embraced it, transforming it into a narrative of perseverance, a testament to the enduring strength of family. Chapter 7, A Legacy of Remembrance. The Delaney house eventually became a symbol of redemption, a place where children learned about understanding trauma and celebrating their imaginations. It had transformed into a community center dedicated to supporting youth, housing workshops designed to spark creativity and bolster resilience. Helen and Samuel pooled their resources, ensuring the center flourished beyond their wildest expectations. They invited local artisans to guide artwork sessions, igniting sparks of creativity among children eager to express their thoughts. Memories of ghostly laughter resonated like distant echoes, now reframed with warmth and compassion. With each passing year, the town recognized the importance of remembrance while confronting sorrow and self-advocacy. They erected a mural by the community center, a vibrant mosaic of color and life, portraying the journey from darkness into light, a timeless tale encapsulating the struggles faced and overcome by families in Pine Hollow. In quiet moments, Dr. Lawson often visited the center, observing the youth, now vibrant with curiosity and joy. He felt the weight of their laughter, a symphony rising from the remnants of pain that once disguised itself within silence. With Helen and Samuel leading the charge, the once imposing shadow of the Delaney house now radiated hope, the past woven into the hearts and minds of those who knew both despair and resilience. The cycle of trauma, now met with understanding, blossomed into a future that held the promise of safety and unity. And so, Pine Hollow stood resilient, a testament to the belief that even amidst a history laden with darkness, light can break through, turning whispered fears into a chorus of shared strength. As Helen and Samuel looked out into the gathering dusk one evening, they understood that the toys that once aged like flesh had transformed into symbols of renewal, reminders that through courage they had sculpted a legacy for generations to come, painting them in radiant hues of hope and resilience. They embraced the fact that their experiences would always be a part of them, now framed not in isolation and silence, but as lighthouses guiding others through their storms. Chapter 8, Shadows of the Past. As time went on, Pine Hollow seemed to heal, yet some shadows never dissipated entirely. The specter of the Delaney house continued to linger, serving as both a symbol of triumph and a reminder of the darker days that had unfolded within those walls. Not all residents had been entirely willing to let the past lie, reluctant to embrace the very stories Helen and Samuel had worked so hard to transform into beacons of hope. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves danced to the ground, Helen noticed a group of children lingering near the community center. They seemed less interested in the activities hosted there and more inquisitive about the remnants of the Delaney house. She felt her heart race, a blend of nervousness and determination coursing through her veins. "Hey," she called out, stepping forward with a warm smile. "I see you're curious about the house. Would you like to know what it was like?" The group hesitated, exchanging glances before one brave child, a girl with bright red hair and curious eyes, stepped forward. "I heard it was haunted," she whispered, as though the words held a weight beyond their meaning. Helen knelt to meet her gaze, recognizing the child's fear and fascination. "I used to think that too," she began, "but what really happened inside is a story about strength and survival." She invited the children into the warmth of the community center, and as she shared drafts from their history, the children's initial fright morphed into engagement. She spoke of her own experiences, the laughter that had once echoed through the halls and the rediscovery of joy that came with reclaiming power over her life. "Sometimes, it's where we've been that tells us how strong we are," Helen said, her voice steady, "just like the shadows can teach us about the light." As Helen pulled the children into her narrative, she saw flickers of understanding and connection dance across their faces, reminding her of her own youthful self. Middle schoolers gathered around her, sipping apple cider as tales of caution transformed into tales of courage. That evening, she planted seeds of resilience among them, ensuring the darkness would not claim anyone else without a fight. Yet lingering in Helen's heart was a different kind of grief, one that revolved around the ghosts of the Delaney children who had not been accounted for, whose names had been lost to time. As a new generation of kids flourished, those names remained in her thoughts, a pulse that throbbed beneath her sense of accomplishment. Chapter 9, Uncovering the Unnamed. Driven by her commitment to those who had suffered, Helen began researching the names of lost children from the records left behind. Dr. Lawson supported her endeavor, bringing in antique newspapers, police files, and town documents. Each scrap of paper felt like a time capsule, holding secrets and echoing cries for attention. As her long nights wore on, the world blurred with ink and grainy photographs. She dug deeper, piecing together lives and stories long forgotten. Each name that surfaced turned into a heartbeat, the unfulfilled potential of children lost within the confines of tragic history. One chilly night, she stumbled across a tattered page in an old newspaper that reported a mysterious disappearance. 3 additional children connected to the Delaney household may have been living under circumstances that defy understanding. An address followed, and hope surged through her, a glimmer beckoning like a lighthouse in the fog. "Dr. Lawson," she breathlessly relayed the information, determination igniting her words. "These children deserve acknowledgement. They were not just toys, they were lives that mattered." The doctor, whose own heart had been ingrained in healing and hope, nodded gravely. "I'll assist any way I can," he promised. Together, they began organizing community efforts to locate the families of the lost children, reaching out to nearby towns and searching forgotten archives. With each lead, more stories unfolded. Names that had slipped through time and lives compromised ultimately found their way back to light. Flyers depicted fading photographs, wandering souls grasping for their connections, clinging to their shadows while brave voices called them home. As they gathered more names, the community began to resonate with understanding. Helen organized a candlelight vigil, an evening of remembrance where they would gather at the community center, lighting lanterns for each child lost to the history of the Delaney house. Their stories intertwined with the growing narrative of resilience, flowing into the hearts of all who had come to support them. Chapter 10, Bringing the Past to Light. On the night of the vigil, the air was heavy with reverence. Families filled the community center, candles illuminating faces softened by memory, flickering like stars twinkling in the night sky. Helen stood at the front, her heart filled with both tenderness and resolve, aware that she was steering a movement forged in love, a love that resonated far beyond the house at the end of their street. One by one, members of the community shared memories and reflections, echoing the strength fostered through shared adversity. Helen listened intently, their collective voices rose like a chorus, binding them together in grief and healing. She knew deep down that grief was intertwined with survival. As the final candle was lit, she stepped forward, holding the names freshly inscribed on slips of parchment. "Tonight, we honor the children whose stories were left untold and unveil them from the shadows," Helen proclaimed, her voice steady yet emotional. "Their voices will now echo through us, reminding us of the importance of speaking out, reaching out, and embracing each other." The crowd hushed, and the flickering light of candles danced with the hope of those present. Helen's heart surged with confidence, knowing that in acknowledging the past, they were not only preventing it from repeating but creating a legacy that would ripple through generations. As the evening waned, the luminescent glow surrounded them, bringing something sacred to the atmosphere. Names spoken aloud floated like whispers, transforming their memory into something vibrant. They weren't just lost, they had been rediscovered amid the glow of flame and heart. In that moment, Helen knew they had broken the silence that weighed down the town for so long. The darkness had not won. Instead, they had intertwined the stories of the lost with their own, reminding everyone that love transcends boundaries even as shadows linger in the corners of memory. As families drifted away, carrying the significance forged that night, Helen felt a deep sense of peace envelop her. Because amidst her journey, through whispers of darkness and echoes of hope, the children who had aged like flesh were now woven into the tapestry of their stories, a legacy of remembrance tied to the spirit of resilience that flourished in Pine Hollow. The days that followed were filled with warmth, not just from the lingering memories of the vigil, but also from the ongoing efforts the community embraced to support one another. The bond formed amidst shared sorrow transformed into a commitment to keep healing alive. Pine Hollow became a haven where laughter and resilience bloomed, offering a counterbalance to the shadows of the past. Helen and Samuel often visited the community center, now officially named the Delaney Resilience Center in honor of the children they had remembered. They organized events to foster creativity and connection, encouraging local artists to showcase their works and offering children a space to express their fears and hopes through art. It became a sanctuary, reverberating with the echoes of laughter and spirited conversations, a testament to their journey from silence to liberation. Years rolled on and the center became an integral part of Pine Hollow, a beacon of hope for those grappling with their own struggles. Survivors found safe space in their stories, discovering strength enough to rise and examine their own shadows. Some even began to share their experiences, allowing healing to ripple outward beyond the walls of the center, guiding the next generation to recognize their worth. Dr. Lawson continued to play an essential role in the center, counseling those who needed support. His expertise, paired with Helen and Samuel's determination, created a threefold force of healing that touched countless lives. Together, they taught that vulnerability is a form of strength, and their uncanny ability to connect stories shifted the town's fabric into one woven with empathy. Time turned the pages, and with each year that passed, the delicate history was celebrated. Annual events blossomed around themes of remembrance, resilience, and unity. The children once lost to history now became perennial symbols of courage, shaping a narrative that empowered all of Pine Hollow. Their lives guided the community toward light, transforming pain into progress. As Helen stood one golden afternoon at the community center watching children play under the open sky, the shadows of the past faded further into the background. The legacy of her childhood was no longer a weight, rather a source of strength. Those uneasy memories sparked deep-seated compassion, clearing paths for shared stories to surface, illuminating lives with bright hope. Hand in hand with Samuel, she would often revisit the Delaney house site, now adorned with sunflowers and daisies, vibrant flowers growing tall in a once desolate spot. Together, they launched a garden initiative where children learned to nurture life as they had been nurtured, planting the seeds of resilience in fertile soil. Each blossom symbolized an echo of their past, flourishing, thriving, reminding them that from darkness, beauty could be born anew. Pine Hollow transformed, thriving in the embrace of compassion and courage. And in years to come, as the community continued to flourish, the spirit of the children who had aged like flesh became whispers carried on the wind, binding the past to the present with threads of empathy, love, and remembrance. Each story woven into the town became a lantern, guiding others to find their way, illuminating the path through every shadow into a brighter tomorrow.